Hey guys, it's Paradise, and this is the secret to finding the best loot in Grey Zone Warfare. So whether you're looking for new weapons, gear, or expensive goodies, these are some tips that we wanted to share that you need to know. If we do help you out, you can drop a like to show support and subscribe because we're going to have more coming your way very soon. The biggest thing to know about getting amazing loot in Grey Zone Warfare is where to find it, and something that you need to know is that the game actually has split loot zones based on the difficulties of the different areas. What this essentially means is if you want to find the best stuff, you will need to venture into areas that, well, are a bit more dangerous. You're probably asking yourself, how do you know which areas have better loot? Well, the map actually seems to follow a mirrored pattern from each of the starting bases no matter which faction you play. The towns outside of each faction's HQ is basically the lowest level loot areas. As you then move away from these towns towards the other faction's HQ, you'll find points of interest that are essentially the middle level loot locations. And then after this, in the middle area between each faction, there's the high loot and most dangerous areas on the map. For us, we're part of the faction Crimson Shield. This means our low-level loot area is the starting town just outside of our base called Vongsa. After this, we can then go to either Hunter's Paradise or Sawmill, which is essentially the middle loot zones. And then finally, we have the Midnight Sapphire as the higher loot area. It is worth mentioning these specific callouts are the areas closest to our faction, but it's essentially mirrored depending on which faction you're at. But since you are able to grab a helicopter and basically fly across the map, you can choose any of the areas as long as you can get to it. Obviously, the further out from your home base that you go, there's a bigger chance of encountering other players from other factions, but if this is a problem for you, you could just swap to the PvE mode and grab your loot in that instead. Also, it's very easy to unlock additional landing zones, and you can steal a seat on someone else's helicopter to grab them if you want to. If that helicopter is going to an LZ that you don't have unlocked, it will activate it for you as soon as you jump off. Also, by progressing the main missions, you will unlock extra LZs all around the map, making it far easier to get around. So you might be wondering, what kind of loot can you get in the different areas between low, medium, and high? In low-level areas, you will essentially find light armor, some very basic attachments like grips, and bare-bone weapons like the M16, but there is some goodies to find. For example, in our starting area in the hideout located near the town hall here on the map, you can actually find this M700 sniper rifle in a UN loot box, which is an amazing sniper, especially early on, and it's actually one of the better ones in the game. But if sniping isn't your thing, this actually sells for around 800 bucks, making it a very good farm for money, as it seems to spawn quite commonly. Meanwhile, in the middle loot areas, this is a bit of a step up, and you will find enemies that deal a lot more damage but come with higher rarity loot than lower level ones. For example, some of the loot that you can find in the town of Banpar is enemies with armor that has more space on them, AKMSs and AK-74s, with the 545 variant of ammo, which we personally like using as they seem to take down enemies quite quickly if you have good ammo. But the higher level zones have higher chances at getting some of the best stuff, which commonly means much rarer weapons with more rare attachments, or more common weapons with rare attachments. For example, in the Fort Narith area, we managed to loot this really spicy AK variant that came fully kitted out. However, you will need to watch out for enemies as they're often in packs and will shoot some of the best ammo in the game. They're way more armored, they're in dense packs, and they overall deal way more damage and kill you quickly. So essentially, you have to come prepared. But we've been farming gear here a lot, and here are some of the things that we learnt along the way to get you some of the better loot. In specific points of interests in these zones, such as the Midnight Sapphire or the starting town, there's actually a chance for a boss to spawn. So far, the way that we've been able to identify this is if an area has a boss, they will usually be wearing a beret. Defeating these bosses often leads to getting some of the best weapons in the game, and if you do this in the higher loot zones, this means some of the spiciest guns. You can, however, still find bosses in the starting towns if you want an early upgrade. If you want to test this for yourself, then simply head to the market area in the middle of the starting towns and look for a boss that spawns, which is usually in this back area near the stairs in the big building. In the higher tier loot zones though, there will be a lot of randomly placed attachments all over the ground and even on top of unsuspecting boxes. So make sure to check around areas by quickly looking up and down and seeing if the cursor changes to a diamond, and that will let you know that there is something in the area to loot. This is actually super handy because sometimes it can be really hard to see the loot, and this is a quick way to detect it all. Another thing that will have you missing out on loot is the fact that it can take a while for the loot in chests and boxes to actually load in as you search it. This means when you open a loot container, you need to wait for all of the loot to populate one at a time, like you're searching through it in real life. Another way to get some really good loot is by opening rooms with locked doors, and so far the community has come to the conclusion that the best way to farm this is to repeatedly defeat enemies in the area where the locked doors are that you need the keys for. Supposedly, there is a chance for a key to spawn each time you complete a point of interest. These rooms that are locked and require a key normally have a box in them with multiple weapons or attachments, and even other boxes with armor, so it's worthwhile being on the lookout for those keys. With this in mind, one of the best farming methods to get these keys is to find an area that is small but also dense with a lot of enemies. This means you can take them all out and then check each of their bodies for keys, rather than having to search for stragglers everywhere in a large area. On top of this, there are loot rooms that we found that don't require keys, and so we thought we would share them with you guys. Fort Narith Air Base at the bottom floor of the main building has a loot room here, which is full of attachments and extra goodies. In Ban Pa, there's a coastal shack that has 2 loot boxes in it with weapons and armor, and this isn't too hard to get to. But if you know of any additional loot rooms that don't require keys, put them in the comments down below so we can build up this data and learn as a community. So far, out of all of the areas that we've tested, we actually recommend farming in the Midnight Sapphire area, as this is one of the best places that we've visited so far. It has a very high density of enemies, unlike in some of the other areas, simply because it's a hotel. But what this means is that there is way less opportunity for the NPC AI to jump out of bushes or snipe you through them and kill you instantly. Because it's a hotel area, they basically need to funnel out of the buildings and corridors, making it way easier to shoot them down as they come around corners and through doors. On top of this, if you manage to defeat the boss of this area, there's a chance he's carrying this awesome sniper which we know a lot of you will want for your collection. Another area that is very popular at the moment for the quest and loot there is YBL1. This place is a honeypot for loot because there's a ton of attachments dotted around, even in the small guard house outside the bunker, as well as the fact that there's a frenzy of PvP here so you can clap other players and yoink all of their stuff. If you don't want an area that is prone to PvP encounters, then you can go to Sawmill because like YBL1, this is a small contained area and we had the best luck getting keys here because it was quite easy to spot all of the enemies and wipe them pretty quickly. There's actually quite a few weapon boxes here to loot and doors to open that are locked with extra boxes in them, so this overall is a very dense loot area to farm. These are just some suggestions of places that we've found, but we haven't visited everywhere on the map yet, so share any other spicy spots that you've found out. Here's some additional things to point out regarding the loot in Grey Zone Warfare. You can actually get the ability to purchase some of the best loot in the game just by doing missions and leveling up the vendors. A lot of people will probably want the MK18, and you can get this by leveling the Gunny vendor up to level 3. So if you want even more options and attachments, the best way to do that is to level up Gunny. Another thing to mention is that the game is in early access, so the loot pool at the moment isn't very big. This means these locations will likely be much better to loot in the future as the variety of weapon and armor and loot increases. Also, this list from Reddit user IWannaMFAC SCP-1471 shows a full list of weapons in the game currently, and some of these are actually not implemented in the game yet but could be coming in the future. For example, I'm still searching for that MP7 and SIG MCX. So drop a like if we helped you out with all of this loot knowledge, and share it to anyone you think might be interested. But do subscribe for daily gaming videos, news and guides.